and I'm calling this episode Better Than Group Therapy. All right, we've got to talk about it, but there's so much going on. This is week 4, and the men are leaving. I'm not okay with it. We've got 2 one-on-ones and a group date. Let's get into it. Welcome to Reality TV Therapy with me, Dr. Diane. Welcome back to my channel, Reality TV Therapy. I am a little bit late on this video. I was away in Tahoe, and by the time I got back and filmed it, but actually there's some good things because it allows some time to settle. I think a lot more about the episode, and then we have some new updates. So that is my housekeeping. But let's get into it, and let's start with the night. The first thing I have to say is just so sweet, and I think all of you in the comments are enjoying the same thing, are all the little intimate moments that we see. In particular, at the start of this episode, Charles is teaching the men, what, Tai Chi or something? The times where they're in the pool, the sweet little interactions are what really makes this season so amazing. Teaching Pascal how to do his laundry, and just the guys hanging out. Let me know if you love it as much as I do. But let's get into the first group date. Really one of my favorites because of the cause, Stand Up for Cancer. I think that was really well done. Now, I don't know, I'm going to age myself, but I remember the Chippendale dancers. They were, in my generation, it was like a big deal. People would go see them dance. I never saw them, but I saw another group that was kind of similar to that. But what I loved was all the prep kind of behind the scenes, the men doing the roles and practicing and then choosing their costumes with such care. And then saying, we're ready for it, bring it on, because we're doing this for a different reason. And they brought a great audience too. I love it when the people are in the audience cheering them on. The crowd went wild. It was great. I also have to say that Caitlin Bristow, I think, is a perfect person for this. Caitlin, if you didn't know, she at one point was the Bachelorette. She has had her own show on the road. She's very sassy, very sexual, and Caitlin is just perfect with her facial expressions because sitting next to Joan, the two of them, I think, were just the perfect duo, right? Like, sir, looking at each other, I just thought it was great energy. And Joan, she was just kind of like embarrassed for the guys a little bit, but then really got into it. And I thought the squeals, it was just precious. Who was your favorite person? Let's go through the list. Jonathan, the little gold bikini, like, wow. And again, really, you've never done this before. Pascal clearly got into it with the money machine. But then Mark as the fireman, wow, that was hot. And Dan and Gary and Charles looking at himself saying, oh, I'm handsome. Just all of the men really brought it, and that is what made for such energy. Let's also talk about Gil. We didn't see Gil much. Finally, the producers caught up with what they said they were going to do, is really edit him out. And we didn't. He was part of that group, but we really didn't see much of Gil. So I actually kind of appreciated it. Okay, then Joan, after the event, she spends time with all of the men in conversations. And this is the one with Chalk. Now, Chalk is really talking about his mother who's ill with cancer and that he's going to talk to her the next day, and we know what's coming. It's like, oh my gosh. But these connections are really getting deeper. And then they pivot to the men where Gil says something like, Prada doesn't rip. He says that to Pascal. I just think these are kind of actually funny little interactions. But then Keith, I'm like, okay, Keith, this episode in particular just felt like some cringe moments. Him going back to sort of doing the Chippendales. It's like, Keith, you already had a chance to do that. Why bring it back to that? I thought it was just a little bit odd, and Keith seems a little bit uncomfortable in these intimate situations. Finally, Chalk does get the group date rose, but I want you to start paying attention to something because I didn't know if it was just me. But did you notice that Joan doesn't kiss many of the men very passionately, but she does Chalk? More like an open mouth kiss. The other guys, we see the back of her head a lot, but it feels more like little pecks, little kisses. But she really goes all in with Chalk. Like you see her intimately kissing Chalk. And I think Joan has been very intentional. Remember, night one, not a lot of kisses. I think maybe like one. We're going to get to it in fantasy suites. Joan is going to call it and say she doesn't want a bed in the room. So I think she's being very intentional about her behaviors, and I'm watching closely. But let me know in the comments if you agree, if you notice that Chalk is the one who's getting the juicier kisses. Okay. And then, of course, the next morning when Chalk finds out that his mother has passed, how tragic. The timing of it all. And this is reminiscent if you didn't see The Golden Bachelor, because this is what happened to Joan. She had a great one-on-one date with Gary, and then the next morning got notice that her daughter had postpartum depression and she needed to go home. Same thing is happening. He gets the group rose. He's had the time of his life. And then he gets this very sad news. It's the same bench, too, where they're talking. And of course, it's the right thing to do for him to go home. Joan is really consoling him. He really loves the physical affection. He's very verbal. And Joan multiple times has said that he reminds her of her husband and that he makes her feel safe. So I'm completely convinced that Chalk is the front runner. We see that because you see Joan talking about it, saying she has hope, thinking about him, and if he leaves, her journey would be very different and she would always be wondering. So anyway, at that point, we're not sure how long he's going to be gone. Then the other part about the title of this video, Better Than Group Therapy, is Mark. We catch Mark. The guys are at the pool. Mark's on the phone with Kelsey, his daughter, who won the last Bachelor with Joey. And he's saying,
in the last 6.5 years.
Really relate to a lot of people there, right?
Everybody.
It's almost like therapy.
It is. No, I mean, honestly, it's better than therapy.
I want to spend a little time talking about this because this is why I think this season in particular is so touching. Because we get to know the men, and the men are bonding. This is like group therapy. You can see their walls coming down, but there's something more that's happening. They are processing their grief. They're processing their divorce. And this is something that I have seen in my clinical practice. So many years ago, I worked on a grief trial at Stanford where there was a woman, Susan Nolan Huxtable. It's irrelevant, but we actually studied how long the process of grief is. So in the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, it says that grief is typically 2 months. 2 months, that's nothing. Meaning that if you're depressed during that time, that's considered normal. Well, Dr. Huxtable said, no, we need to study the process of grief. So I actually worked on her clinical trial as one of the investigators. And we went into the homes of people who were caregiving for someone who was on hospice. So think about it. Your partner it's imminent that they're going to die. And we interviewed them before the person passed and then after. Literally, I was going into the homes, particularly of the men who were in such a negative place. It's different for women. Women oftentimes have a bigger social group, right? They're in general, not always, the heart of the home. They're the ones who are doing all the coordinating, all the social activity. So when the wives pass, when you've gone through a divorce, the men oftentimes don't figure out how to create their own social group. This is why I think this bonding is so special for the men. They keep talking about my brothers. That's what I saw. I saw the men fared much worse. Now, oftentimes, many of them would get remarried, but during that period of grief, they usually went into isolation. And so that was my take on it. So Mark saying that this was better than group therapy, I can see that because it's also positive and fun, and all the men are not feeling so alone. Okay, let's now talk about the one-on-ones because we have 2 of them. We have Jordan. I don't know, Jordan, I just feel like he's not sharing that much. I feel like somehow he, is an athletic guy. Joan is kind of surprised he doesn't know how to ice skate, but ice skating is a very specific thing. And unless you grow up in cold areas, well, like, why would you ice skate? But his story about his ex, yes, she sounds like she cheated on him. He really doubled down and really went into his parenting, cared very much for his children. But I just still feel like he's holding back. Like it feels to me like Jordan is kind of waiting on something. So I just don't feel like we really get to know him that well. Let me know what you think. The second one-on-one is Guy Gansert, and we really do need to talk about him and why I said I was happy that I had a little bit of time between this video, because Guy just released a statement. I'm not going to read the entire statement, but it's just in light of the fact that this franchise has had 2 previous negative episodes with protective orders, with restraining orders, and now it's come out that Guy, who is a prominent doctor in Reno, and his ex-wife, who is a politician. It's very confusing. Okay, the statement is pretty well written. He's trying to say, we were married for 34 years and this is not my best behavior. This was a lapse in judgment. I went back and I read through whatever I could find online. It sounds like, yes, during the divorce, things got a little bit ugly. And at one point he put something behind his wife's rear tire when she was at the gym. And then, fortunately, I don't think she was injured or anything happened. And then this protective restraining order, she retracted it later. So the producers, I think, are saying, well, they retracted it, so in the screening, we covered our butts. I still am always thinking about the women. And here's the thing. If you are in an intimate situation, again, like a fantasy suite with someone who has any kind of prior history of violence, are we putting the lead in any kind of vulnerable position? Well, Joan's handling herself very well. I think that they need to expand their screening to say, if anything negative is going to come out about you, believe me, Bachelor Nation's going to find out about it. And it really just puts a negative light on the entire franchise. So is Guy so wonderful that we needed him in the series? I don't know. And I think you do trust somebody who's a doctor to protect people. So it's disappointing. Okay, it's disappointing. And I think we need to eliminate this because it just drags everything down. But we're going to see what happens. And at this point, they can't really edit him out because I think a Guy makes it pretty far. But back to the date. Okay, I digress. Back to the date. Guy needs some cooking skills, right? Joan is even saying, come on, you're an ER doctor. You don't know how to zest a lemon. Okay, and Joan, where are the onion goggles, right? They're cutting, they're cooking together. But I did like that the date seemed very real. And then there's a little bit of dancing and some kissing. And that house, can we have a moment for that house? I think this is more in Malibu, Santa Monica. I'm not exactly sure, but it's overlooking a beautiful view. She's got that infinity pool, and it's just lovely to see where Joan is living. Let's get to the cocktail party. What I do love about Joan is that she doesn't cancel the cocktail parties, right? We've seen previous bachelorettes. She would be upset about Chalk leaving and say, I'm canceling the cocktail party. We're going to go right to the rose ceremony. But she doesn't do that. She gives all of the men a chance. And this is where they're all bonding. So I love that about Joan. And she really genuinely thanks them again and again about what they've given up to be there. And I think that is how she really cares deeply for all of them. But we know she is concerned. Then Chalk, boom, comes back. Chalk comes back. That seemed like a big, quick turnaround. But if you listen closely to what Chalk said, it sounds like his parents were probably divorced. He said this was the first parent that he lost, but that it was the mother's husband is there probably taking care of things. And so the question is, this is an amazing opportunity. Does he come back as soon as possible? And I think that was also right for him. But their greeting, right? The way that she embraces him, the way that they touch, I just really feel like this is something special. This relationship is undeniable. Okay. Now, here are the sad goodbyes. Oh my God. Charles and Gary and Dan. Gil goes home too. They don't make a fuss about Gil. But wow, we lose 3 great men in one fell swoop. And this is something, if you haven't watched the franchise before, again, I've been watching from the beginning. This has never happened, or at least they've never shown it happen. Usually people say goodbye, Jesse comes in, say your goodbyes, and the person leaves. And maybe the lead talks to one of them. But never do the guys go in the courtyard, interrupt their filming, and talk about it. And then we've got Dan, who's talking about he lives alone and that these guys and how special it is. And then Charles saying that he found a different kind of love. This is really what the show's all about. It's about this brotherhood. It's about the men hugging each other, Keith grabbing a Mark and Charles, all that sweetness. You know, this group of men are going to continue to be friends and support each other for a long time. So that's what I really loved about this episode. And yeah, it probably is better than group therapy, as Mark says. Love, love, love this. So you let me know, are you enjoying the season as much as I am? Obviously, I am a huge fan of this because I love the healing that is happening. And that's what we can learn. We can learn that in love, you can be wounded, but you can also be healed. And why not with a group of other men all going through the same thing? So that's my take for this week. Let me know your thoughts and your comments, and more soon.